Today's talk is called Got Power, because we are on our week that we're talking about the power of the month, which is power. Talk about confusing, right? So the 12 powers or attributes are something that Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, came up with, well, he sort of came up with or put together, that are attributes that we all have that are really not separate from our God identity or a Christ identity, but more like broken out pieces, like a prism makes white light into a rainbow, so that we can, sometimes it's easier to work on stuff in chunks instead of all at once. So that's what the 12 powers are about. And this month is about power, or also known as mastery. And I actually prefer the term mastery because I think it makes a little more sense. We'll get into that in a minute. But the color, even though the colors are totally arbitrary, is purple. And that's interesting mostly because purple at one time could only be worn by royalty because it was so expensive to be made, and there was actually a decree about that. So that is a color that actually really makes sense with the color it represents. So that's just a kind of a fun side note. When we use our power, we're coming from authority. We'll remember that a little bit more later. So to start with, when we hear the word power, sometimes we think of the way we use it in our common terms as, and it's not necessarily a nice word, because we think of people using it in a not nice way. So here is a quote from Your God-Given Potential, which is a book that was written by Winifred Wilkinson Hausman, which is quite a long and tongue twister name, all about 12 powers. And she said, power is to be exercised not for the purpose of controlling others, but for the purpose of taking dominion over our own thoughts and feelings in order to come into a greater God awareness. Power is to be exercised not for the purpose of controlling others, but for the purpose of taking dominion over our own thoughts and feelings in order to come into a greater God awareness. So, 10 years ago now, I was working at Unity headquarters, had a lot of things going on. I was still I was a lot younger then. I mean, we learn things as we get older, right? And I was working in an office, and it was kind of, there was a lot of things going on in my personal life and things going on in my professional, stuff. There was lots of stuff. You've been there with stuff, right? And so I found myself without a voice. I couldn't talk, which is extra frustrating because being fluent in sign language, I had perfectly able to say what I needed to say, but I wasn't around anybody who understood it. So that was extra frustrating. But anyway, I had no voice, or barely anything like that. And so I had emailed a friend of mine, a wise friend of mine, and said, just send some prayers my way. I don't know what the heck is going on, but this is where I'm at. And this very wise friend sent back and said, well, honey, who did you let steal your power? And I was like, whoa, bam! When you get those bam, you're like, wow, okay. Because power, the 12th power of power or mastery is in the throat. It's where we speak from, right? And so when I lost my voice, I was, like I said, there was all this stuff, right? And I had not figured out how to advocate or stand up for myself at that time yet. And so he was spot on when he said, who did you let take your power? I'm like, whoa. Yeah, okay. I get to decide, even though there's stuff that's outside of my control happening in my life, I still get to have control over, well, I still get to say if it doesn't work for me, I still get to decide how I want to respond to it, all of those things, right? And so it's interesting now when I start to feel a little scratchy. Sometimes it means it's the beginning of allergy season, but often it means that maybe I'm forgetting to say what I need or stand up for what's important. And if I can come from that awareness, usually everything comes back and I'm fine. But it's that I know what it means when that happens for me. Now, may be a different trigger for you because we all are different. But for me, when I start to feel a little clenched up, it's because I'm not saying what I need to say or not standing in my own spiritual authority. And Paul Hasselbeck wrote in the book Heart-Centered Metaphysics, our spoken words are vehicles through which power manifests in our lives. So when we speak is how we use this power. That's why it's in our throat. So we have this idea of spiritual power or mastery. And what is so important about that is that self-mastery, right? Because it's not about controlling someone else, it's about getting ourselves together. And so in the book Divine Audacity by Linda Martell-Whitsitt, which is all about the 12 powers, super fabulous book, she's got a whole list of kind of proof from other faith traditions that self-mastery is a super important part of our spiritual journey. It's taught in many different faith traditions. So from Judaism, who is strong? He who controls his passions. From Islam, the strong man is not the good wrestler. The strong man is only he who controls himself when he is angry. From Taoism, he who conquers others has physical strength. He who conquers himself is strong. From Buddhism, though one should conquer 1,000,000 men on the battlefield, yet he indeed is the noblest victor who has conquered himself. From Sikhism, with the conquest of my mind, I have conquered the whole world. From Hinduism, the man is disciplined and happy who can prevail over the turmoil that springs from desire and anger here on earth. And from Christianity, 2 Timothy, for God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. See the theme there? That's some good stuff. Now, this is using the word strength and not the way that we would use, because strength is also one of the 12 powers, you may remember, but this is obviously talking about that power of self-mastery and having that control over oneself. Because I'm guessing I'm not the only one who's been in the situation where something's going on or people are saying things and you've realized that the best thing you can do to be strong is to not engage in the argument or the drama, or that's really hard sometimes. That's really hard. When someone comes at you with yucky stuff, you want to protect and defend. And sometimes that might be the right way, but where do we come from? Self-discipline lets us say, I hear you. I respond with love. Whew. It's hard stuff. So when we come from that, we respond to hate, discord with steadfastness, with love, with determination. Not to say that those things push us over, but when our power, we can stand in love always, even in the midst of whatever is coming at us. So Along with self-mastery, another important aspect of power or mastery is spiritual authority. Now, I went through seminary and I got ordained and all of that, so in theory I have spiritual authority. And Linda writes in her book about how when she gets up to give a talk on Sunday, how she kind of clothes herself in that idea. In Unity, we don't usually wear vestments and all of the fancy outfits that you see in a lot of other faith traditions. For them, that's one of the ways to clothe themselves in that authority. I have to say, there's a certain special thing when I do wear my stole, though. But that's something that it's a consciousness thing. It really doesn't have anything to do with the outfit. The outfit is an outer expression of what's happening on the inside, right? But spiritual authority is not something that is only for clergy people or people who meditate a certain amount of time and have jumped through the certain amount of hoops or stood on one leg for long enough or whatever it is that makes someone, or walked across the fiery coals, or whatever it is, right? I mean, there's lots of different ways we think people make them extra special and spiritual. Spiritual authority is something that we call forth from ourselves, and we all have it. We all have it. When you stand in the truth of knowing that with a loved one who is not feeling well, and you say, I know the truth of you, that you are whole and healthy, and I'm going to stand here with you in this, in the midst of whatever you have going on. That is that's putting on your spiritual authority vestments. When you stand in the midst of the craziness of the world and you decide to respond in love, you're calling forth from your spiritual authority, right? That power. And so we call forth and say forth, right? Because our power is in our throat, our ability to speak. And so there is something powerful in the words that we say and the words that we think. Like, you might have heard this command before, let there be light. That is words of spiritual authority. Let there be, which some people think kind of sounds, let there be like whatever, like let there da, 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 da. But no, let there be. This is going to be. I call it forth. Let there be light. Let my people go. An old Moses favorite. It's another call of spiritual authority. I also think of that great moment, slams the rod down and parts the Red Sea. Spiritual authority. Or maybe Jesus, take up your mat and walk. Called forth from spiritual authority, not because that any of those were extra special, but because they knew that they came from spiritual authority. We shall overcome. Something from our era. Something called forth from that authority of knowing that we will stand in our strength, in our power, use our voices for love, for connection, for what God has called us to do. So our power or mastery is very exciting and can be a little bit scary, because what are we calling forth, right? Have you ever said, I'm sick and tired of this fill in the blank? How's that working for you? I invite you to choose different words. And you can use your words in a different way. You can use your power in a different way. We can stand in our authority in any time or place. I don't believe that I have any more power to, bless the water or bless the whatever than anybody else here does, except for I have more practice. And I have more fancy degrees on my wall. But we all practice that authority, right? And so when we practice that spiritual truth in us, we stand in more authority. And maybe cleaning up some of our language is part of the way we do it. Maybe spreading it out into the world is one of the ways we do it. So I just want to notice, you may have noticed there's some rocks here down here. Nancy and I painted peace rocks this last Wednesday. And some of them say peace, just straight old peace. And some of them say choose peace. And some of them say other things like joy and imagine and love and things like that. So these are just the beginning of our peace rock adventure. And the idea is that we take these and put them places to help spread that idea of peace and love and connection. And maybe you take one and you put them somewhere like by your front door or in your garden to remind you, let's shift into our power. Let's shift into our authority. Let's shift into self-mastery. And that's what you need. So that's definitely a great use for a peace rock. Another great use for a peace rock is to find somewhere where it might bless someone else when they may see it and bring that peace, that moment of joy, of remembering, of connecting, of being your true self. So, when you are working your path of spiritual truth and you walk your spiritual truth, you show up as a presence of wholeness. You show up as that. And people notice it, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. They say, I want to be a part of that. I want to be connected to that. And so we use our power of mastery to just do a little bit better today than we did the day before, right? You think about a master of you go to like a master class. An artist might go to a master class, or a dancer or a musician, right? But you know what? They still practice, right? All the time. They practice. And so that's what we need to remember, even as we're moving into having a mastery over our emotions and our feelings and our ways to respond and all of those things. We also continue to practice. And so I invite you to practice and to step aside the everyday concerns of the day, of the year, the month, all the stuff, and to step in to your power, your greatness, your authority.